Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another You Be the Behavior Consultant. It feels like it's been forever since we did one of these, but I am very happy to be back with you. I've been out attending a conference, and that's kind of what inspired this week's live stream. Oh, hey, hello, Cynthia. We've got some of our regulars joining us again. I'm super happy to have you all here. Yes, it's going to be a fun topic today. We're going to talk about, well, I don't know if it's a fun topic, but it's an important topic. We're going to talk about polarization. I think this is something that it kind of impacts all of our lives in many different areas, but we do see it in the animal community. So I thought it would be a good one to discuss. So before we dive all the way in there, I thought I'd go ahead and tell y'all what we're about here. If we've got some new folks that are listening, this is You Be the Behavior Consultant, a live stream I try to do most Mondays. I've been traveling a lot lately, so we haven't been as consistent on our Mondays, but that's life. I guess when spring hits, it seems like there's a lot more travel. So this is how it works. I present a topic for discussion. We do like to be interactive here, so if you are inclined to participate, we do love having your comments and your experience shared in the chat there. And I do have a couple videos if we want to watch them. We might be a little bit less heavy on the videos this time, but we'll definitely recap all your discussions at the end there. So let's get into this topic here. We're going to talk about addressing polarization in the animal community. So I've got some questions here to prompt your participation, hopefully. First of all, we have to talk about, what does it mean to be polarizing? Believe it or not, when I started looking this up, I was like, "Ooh, there's a lot of definitions for this." So it was fun to explore. And then I think a question that might be kind of easy in some ways to answer, perhaps, or I don't know, I thought it was kind of easy. What might be polarizing topics in the animal community? And they don't have to be related necessarily to animal training, but as I started thinking about this, there's lots of things that have been polarizing in our communities. And then we could maybe talk about what's the fallout of polarization and maybe how it happens. How does it even begin in the first place, and that can sort of help us segue into how we might address it. So those are your questions to prompt a little bit of discussion, and maybe while you're thinking about some answers or some thoughts or things you could share in the discussion, I'll kind of tell you what got me thinking about it. And I did post it a little bit in my description when I was what I posted on social media as far as what got me thinking about this is that I just enjoyed so much this conference that I went to that was a little bit more just behavior in general. It wasn't necessarily focused on animal training, but it was such a cool experience in the sense that there was lots of different people presenting on lots of different topics. And I kind of felt like even though people didn't always agree with everybody and the things that they were saying, there was really some cool questions that people asked that generated discussion, but the way that discussion went was really quite, I don't know how to describe it. It was really much a nice give and take and an exchange, but there wasn't sort of this polarizing effect that we're seeing in other areas of discussion. So Cynthia says, taking sides that are black and white and sticking to your side without listening with an open mind to the other side. So maybe giving us a definition of what it can look like to be polarizing. And Chris says, specific ideas that contradict another's ideas on the same subject. And an example for you might be weight management. Yeah, I think in the animal training community, weight management can be one of those topics that can be quite polarizing. It's sort of your maybe one position or another. Yep, for sure. That falls onto our categories of possible examples. And I think there's a lot of examples that are not necessarily just training related. I was thinking of maybe like even, Chris, thinking of your world, like whether, you've talked about parent-raised versus hand-raised birds. I think it could be for some people polarizing, or, clipping birds versus not clipping birds, although that's kind of changing. I think some of these topics are evolving a little bit now over time as people get more information. The whole, what kind of training methods do you use in terms of are, there's been sort of the reinforcement based versus punishment based training. And what are some other ones that come to mind for me? I don't want to give away everything that's on all my slides here, but that might kind of help give you some of the things that we see in the animal world. One that came up for me was I called it nature versus nurture, but it made me think about like breed specific legislation where people sort of have this, because I have a pit bull mix as as my dog, and people kind of have this, you'll see things posted on the internet where people will say that, pit bulls are very dangerous because they're bred to do blah, 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 blah. And I think, gosh, I have such a sweet dog, who loves other dogs and loves other people. And it makes it very difficult for me when I see things about, that are very breed specific, saying that pit bulls are a certain way. And so you'll see people take very specific positions one way or another about specific breeds or even species, right? So some of those topics can be quite polarizing. And anybody else have some ideas on that? Or other polarizing topics that you've maybe encountered in just the animal world in general? I'm throwing out all the ones I already have on a slide out there. I don't want to give away all the ones that I've had. Well, maybe while you guys are thinking, I will do the definition of polarization I found. And like I said, there are, at least in the research I did, there's different kinds of polarization, but in the social psychology world, but I kind of picked sort of a general definition. So in social psychology, the polarization processes describe movement in individuals' views towards opposite extremes, which I think you guys were describing there. A group may begin with individuals that include both moderate supporters and moderate opponents of a subject. The movement to more extreme positions is said to reflect polarization because each side has moved to a more extreme pole or endpoint on the relevant continuum. And and I think it's that extreme that's really kind of important to think about, because there are moderates, and moderates are important, and I think we kind of forget about the moderates on these topics here. So again, going back to some of our examples, so some of the things that I was thinking about, like, do you adopt animals or would you go to a breeder? Some people take really strong positions on whether you should adopt or purchase from a breeder. I think a big one in the parrot world right now is raw foods versus formulated diets. You see some really big discussions on either end for some folks there. Some people have a really strong position on zoos versus sanctuaries. And again, I talked about the nature versus nurture. Some people have strong opinions about hand-raised versus parent-raised animals. And again, all of these you could talk about a lot of different circumstances and conditions, right? I've just given you a couple words there. And then, in animal training, protected contact versus free contact with elephants has been a topic that also created some polarization in the communities. And so here's a new comment, just joined, so apologies if this has been said. Poodles and doodles, training with food or not, training with punishment, adopt or shop. Yeah, so those are definitely some things that have created some polarizing situations, right? Yeah, those are good ones. And Patricia's joining us here saying hello. Yes. So you can see where it happens not just in politics, or not just, over maybe medical treatments or things like that. We see it a lot in our everyday life and other things, but it seems to be in our animal community. Yeah. So yes, definitely raw food versus non-raw. Yeah, I guess that's also in the dog community, right? Animals used for entertainment. Yep. So that's a situation where we get conversations. And so Cynthia says the kill pen scenario in the equine world, to pay for these animals to rescue them or not to rescue because it supports them. Yeah, so that creates controversy as well. Yeah, so it's really, and these are really difficult topics, aren't they? Really challenging topics, and so they can be really really polarizing, but at the same time, maybe there can also be moderate views as well. But what we often find is that the arguments we tend to hear are the extreme ends a lot, right? And these seem to be the ones that get a lot of attention. So I think some ones in animal, private collectors or pet trade versus zoos and conservation programs. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we often see them as being pitted against each other, right? But do they have to be polarizing, right? And because we certainly know examples where those have worked together for the same objectives. Yeah, good points. Good points. Yeah. Yeah, keep thinking on those examples. I was going to share some things that I think are, potentially polarizing topics in the animal training community, or that I see the discussions becoming polarizing at times. We've certainly talked a lot about negative reinforcement procedures that can be applied in a way that are not coercive, especially when the animal wants distance as a reinforcer. Yet we still see a lot of people talking about negative reinforcement as always being a bad thing. Certainly there are times when, I would see it as coercive, but when an animal wants that distance, I think it's the right procedure and a better procedure than systematic desensitization and counter conditioning. There's been a lot of talk about nonlinear contingency analysis and how that can be helpful to us compared to just looking at your typical topical linear approach. I think one that's going to be coming more and more of a topic is how do we define choice and control? We hear that those words being said a lot, but I think there's more to that discussion. What about tethering as a tool for managing birds of prey? That's become more of a topic lately. Someone already mentioned weight management. Is it still a relevant tool for evoking responses for food as a reinforcer? And how do we determine the most effective, efficient, and optimal training procedures? So that's definitely come into discussion a bit more lately. And then also, I think one that I'm finding is I'm having more discussions with in some of the, I see with some of the behavior analysts is this use of differential reinforcement. And we've talked about it a bit when we talk about superimposition, is that really impacting the underlying contingency that's maintaining behavior? So maybe we need to drift away from differential reinforcement a little bit more. So these are topics that can be potentially polarizing because a lot of these strategies have been, pretty embedded in our training culture. So potentially we're going to see some discord on these topics more and more as they become more prevalent. Aspects of them become more prevalent or start to drift away depending on the topic. So there's always potential for polarizing topics on our community as well. So, and keep bringing your examples to the discussion here if you can think of some more as I'm throwing these slides up here. And maybe this is a good time for a video because I do have a lot of slides and it's always nice to have a little break. So I will share an example of, something that this was one of the videos that I shared at the recent conference that I just attended, where again, some of the things that I have on this slide were really important to me to helping to help one of my clients solve an issue. And so a lot of people have a situation where animals are uncomfortable shifting inside because maybe in the past the doors were shut when they didn't want them to be shut, and that was the case with this particular gorilla. And so we really wanted to teach the gorilla that that the door closing was, teaching the gorilla to be comfortable with the door closing. And so this ties back into that use of non-coercive negative reinforcement procedures. And so, yes, you will see the gorilla is also stationing and getting good things for stationing, but it's really the negative reinforcement contingency that matters to the most to the animal. And what's the negative reinforcement contingency in the video is the door closing. So the animal doesn't like the door closing. And so what you'll see is that the approximations of the person closing the door is really dependent on the animal being comfortable. So sitting there comfortably with the trainer. And so every time the animal is sitting there comfortable, we might have that person touch the door handle a little bit and then step away for the animal sitting comfortably and relaxed. And if the animal gets up and moves, that person, you'll see, will hold still at the door handle. And when the animal starts to go back to its station, that's when the person removes themselves from the door handle. So we're reinforcing the behavior of going back to your station by removing that aversive condition, so to speak. And so by doing that, they were able to get to the point of closing the door in one training session, as opposed to using things like systematic desensitization and counter conditioning, which had been tried for months and months and months. And so by acknowledging that, what the animal wants is removal of an aversive, so negative reinforcement, they were able to get there in one session. So you're going to see in the beginning sort of what it looks like when the animal doesn't like the door shut in the beginning, and then how we address that using that negative reinforcement procedure. So let me get to that video for you.
And he can't open it, yeah. So he's gonna bang after that. Like, I don't know that's not gonna shut. Great.
He definitely
looked, but then he relaxed, and you stopped, which is perfect. Okay, so stop, wait. We'll let him come back. And when he comes back, you're going to take that step away like you've been doing. Okay, he's coming, so you can walk away. Excellent. Good job. Good job. Nice work. Oh, nice. And I'd open it right back up. Excellent, guys. Nice work. Very good. Oh, great. And open it right back up. Nice work, you guys. Excellent.
Good job, buddy.
And then open it up. Look at you guys. Look at you.
Good boy, I like that you're making the noise too.
Yep, you're not being sneaky. You're not being sneaky.
Yeah.
Look at you, rock stars.
So Cynthia says, that's a cool example because our tendency would be to open the door when the animal runs towards it. Yes, exactly. So what we're doing instead is teaching the animal that the behavior we want to reinforce is actually going back to your station or moving in the direction towards that station. So that's the behavior that we're trying to reinforce, and we'll take a small, approximation towards that. He doesn't have to be sitting at the station. Just even moving towards that station is a good enough approximation. So So, right. Would this be positive reinforcement concurrent with negative reinforcement? Yeah, so even though there is positive reinforcement for stationing happening, the critical consequence is the negative reinforcement. That's the one he's most concerned about. So that's the one that really matters to him, and that's some of the stuff that we've really learned about from Joe Lang and Israel Gold Diamond, Paul Adranos, everyone in that the book Nonlinear Contingency Analysis. That's a good one to read to learn more about that. So the critical consequence to him really is the negative reinforcement contingency. The positive reinforcement, it's nice, but it's not the one that's really important in this situation, if that makes sense. All right, so let's move on here a little bit. So some of the things that's really important for us to understand about the potential undesired effects of polarization, why we want to, maybe try to avoid it if we can, is, and I know you guys have all experienced this, thanks Patricia, is that we see biased information tends to get disseminated and exponentially spread when we get into that land of polarization. And the information that may get the most traction may not be the stuff that's really evidence-based. We also see what's called automatic reactance. That's a hard word for me to say. And basically, that's sort of that instant digging of your heels in, that resistance to agree or comply, just because it's like, oh, it's the other side's opinion or view. I immediately do not comply. And then we also might see negative inferences about the opposing side. So like you're immediately sort of like, oh, it's the other side, don't like what they have to say. And it can create conflict spirals that harm relationships, and it can affect not only your professional life but also your personal relationships. And I imagine everyone can sort of relate to this, not just in maybe animal training world, but in other aspects of our lives. Yeah, and Patricia says the critical consequence prioritizes. Yep, critical consequence trumps the other ones for sure. So how does polarization happen? So I think this is really fascinating stuff. And again, all these references I'll have for you guys in our in Animal Training Fundamentals. I found a lot of really interesting articles on this stuff. So some of the ways it happens is if you have limited access to resources for more information, and this can sometimes happen because you're coerced into limited resources, and sometimes it's just the result of your current conditions. So you might be in a place where you just don't have access. It wasn't forced on you, but maybe you just don't maybe you don't have access to journal articles, or maybe you can't get to a library or something, or maybe it's because somebody is controlling your access to those resources. And then what happens is you just get repeated exposure to the same information over and over again. And I think we've all fell victim to this on social media, right? So like the social media algorithms keep showing you the things that you click on, and then you get more of the same. So that's your bias getting confirmed. And the first thing that I read, that's your bias getting installed. And then we might have a tendency to surround ourselves with like-minded people who share the same views. So we kind of get this social isolation. And sometimes people are involved in high control groups who are, basically saying, you only hang with the people that are like us, and we're going to make sure you only get access to this information. And that can, also, be a part of your confirmation bias. And I thought this was really interesting. So inflammatory language can generate attention. And so stuff that's posted like on social media that has sort of that exaggerated and inflammatory language, that can skew the landscape. So that tends to get the most engagement and the most attention on social media, which is kind of a bummer, right? So what happens is social media supports sharing that kind of stuff. And what's even sadder is that evidence is not required for that kind of information or language to get traction. So that may mean that the kind of thing that's super popular is not necessarily accurate or evidence-based or valid, but it's getting a lot of traction. And to top it off, and when we were talking about polarization, that it tends to be a small percentage that of the community that tend to be extreme in sharing the information. And what happens is the moderate middle, the people who may be sort of like, well, I can see some of the points on the extreme ends, but I tend to be a little bit more in the middle, that, sometimes this is okay and sometimes that is okay. They tend to not do a lot of questioning, or challenging these extreme ends, and don't really comment so much. And so the moderate middle is sort of not really impacting what's happening with these polarizing topics that are taking over. So the moderate middle remains silent, and there's little to no questioning of the information by the bulk of the community. It makes me sad. So that was really sad stuff to read and learn about. So what does that leave us with? What can we do? So participation. It's hard for us, because I think sometimes we don't want to get involved, but I think we're kind of seeing what's happening when we don't get involved, is that these extreme views tend to start to take traction. So the way I was reading it from these articles is that your informed views do matter. So if you can, engaging in reasonable give and take constructive conversations can really make a difference. And so what do? They can reveal misrepresentations. So did someone misrepresent the other person's argument? And sometimes, though, engaging in those conversations may not be great if you're trying to engage with somebody who's super, super extreme, but at least having those conversations with some of those folks that are moderate, you're out there participating, and the moderate view is getting shared a bit more. And the interesting thing that was pointed out in all these articles is that the biggest fear is that the other side won't actually listen to your views, that your views won't be heard, which was really kind of sad to hear. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have a constructive conversation? So just engaging is not enough. It may not lead to a greater understanding or cooperation if the language of that engagement is unreceptive. So the goal is to listen to the other side carefully, consider their arguments thoughtfully, and evaluate their position in a fair-minded way, which is probably needs a lot more breaking down, right? So this can demonstrate a willingness to work together in the future, maybe demonstrate some trust, and that you're willing to, de-escalate conflict. But that means being genuinely interested in the other person's view, and not necessarily going in there just to win and show that your argument's right, but to engage. And I think that was one of the cool things that I said I experienced at this conference. Like there were people there who have been, behavior analysts for 50 years, going to this conference for 50 years. And some of them were presenting information that was new to them. And I remember talking to one of them saying, I've really got to start incorporating this more into what I'm doing. And they were saying, yeah, we don't know why we didn't see this. I mean, Skinner was doing this back in the 40s, and why weren't we doing this now? And I've got to do the, and this is a person who's been in the field for so long saying, yeah, I've got to start doing this now more. And to have somebody that's that experienced checking themselves and saying, I need to do something new that I didn't realize myself before. I thought that was just really refreshing. It was so refreshing. And these people are really respected in their field and really, looked up to as, big contributors. I mean, their names are ones you see referenced in the textbooks, as having described phenomena in behavior analysis. And to have them presenting new things and new ideas and engaging in conversations that include give and take, and checking themselves and saying, I used to do it this way and now I'm doing this. I don't know. For me, it was really refreshing. And also having people who are really knowledgeable in the audience who were saying, well, what do you think about this? And what about this research paper? How does that relate to what you're saying? And some of them saying, well, I still believe, what this guy said, but, that's interesting. And, or maybe we need to do a little bit more research on that. That was a compelling paper, but it doesn't necessarily answer all our questions yet. We still have to do more research. I mean, those were the kind of discussions that were happening at this conference that were so refreshing to me, as opposed to like sitting in and digging your heels in and saying, I know this is the way it is. It was so nice to see that sort of, nobody had the definitive answer on everything all the time. I don't know if it's because it's quite a scientific community and people that really try to follow that scientific process and believe in that scientific process. And so there was a lot of that. And so I don't know, it just made me think, gosh, I wish I saw that more at all the conferences I attended. But that's what made me think about, we really need to kind of follow these practices. So let's see. Ask questions. Avoid being unintentionally dismissive or arguing over too many tiny details. That's what I saw there. Keep the exchange open and going. Provide a safe environment for discussion. And this is where our behavior analysis stuff can help us. If emotional behavior responses indicate discomfort, that can alert you to a negative reinforcement contingency, right? And that the conversation is aversive. So if you feel like somebody's kind of going, I don't want to engage in conversation with you, that tells you that something that you're doing is aversive. So you can change the contingencies. You can start reinforcing elements of the conversation with which you agree or that have merit in your opinion, and you can bring that conversation back around, so that the person isn't going, I don't want to engage with you, I don't want to share anymore. And it can be hard if the other person is in it to win, right? If you are trying to engage in a productive conversation. But remember, like I said, you can influence that person's behavior. So again, you can practice conflict de-escalation and conversation receptiveness, and by changing what you're doing to impact that other person's behavior, so that it's a give and take. So overall, conversational receptiveness prevents conflict escalation, suggesting that receptive dialogue can support productive and inclusive collaboration despite differences. And so I feel like that's what I saw. I mean, there were definitely presentations where I didn't agree with things that people were saying, or maybe I could see that maybe they were coming from a different discipline, and there was information that they could benefit from that would help what they were trying to do. But you just kind of made that note in your head and went, okay, but what can I take from this that would help with what I'm trying to do? But it didn't turn into this like big divisive kind of situation. So something that I thought was helpful, and this I don't know if this is how you say it, Yeoman's article. They did some really interesting studies with different people to try and help them think about how to be receptive. Now, granted, it's a self-evaluation, but it's kind of a cool way to check yourself. So they had this conversational receptiveness scale, and you basically are just rating yourself, if you strongly agree or disagree on these different things. But I thought these were good questions to kind of ask yourself. Are you willing to have conversations with with individuals who hold strong views opposite to your own? I like reading well thought out information and arguments supporting viewpoints opposite to mine. I find listening to opposing views on this issue informative. I value interactions with people who hold strong views opposite to mine on this issue. On this issue, I'm generally curious to find out why other people have different opinions than I do. I feel that people who have opinions that are opposite to mine on this issue have views which are too extreme to be taken seriously. On this issue, I feel that people who have views that oppose mine rarely present compelling arguments. I feel that information regarding this issue from people who have strong opinions that oppose mine is often designed to mislead less informed listeners. I feel that on this issue, some points of view are too offensive to be equally represented in the media. I feel that this issue is just not up for debate. I feel that some ideas with regard to this issue are simply too dangerous to be part of public discourse. I consider my views on this issue to be sacred. I feel that people who have views that oppose mine on this issue are often biased by what would be best for them and their group. I feel that people who have views that oppose mine on this issue often base their arguments on emotion rather than logic. On this issue, listening to people with views that strongly oppose mine tend to make me angry. I feel disgusted by some of the things that people with views that oppose mine say regarding this issue. On this issue, I often feel frustrated when I listen to people with social and political views that oppose mine. I often get annoyed during discussions of this issue with people with views that are very different from mine. So it kind of, causes you to pause, right? And think about, how are you responding and why you might be responding those ways, so that you can maybe, pause and check yourself and, and think about how you might engage with somebody. So some potential outcomes of having a constructive conversation. So people who engage in constructive conversation are seen as more desirable partners for future collaboration, and their messages are seen as more persuasive. Now, I don't love the word persuasive, because if you remember one of our previous live streams, we talked about how persuasiveness, it can be abused, but that's I'll give you the title of that one at the end here. But again, we don't have to be abusive in our persuasion. Other viewpoints can help us increase the accuracy of our own position by exposing us to new information and perspectives. And I think that one is really important. It doesn't mean that you have to change your viewpoint, but I do think that one thing that's helpful in being open to exploring the other side is refining and fine-tuning your perspective or your viewpoint. I think one thing I appreciate in getting information about the a different angle or a different perspective is refining my position. Am I accurate on my position? Do I have all the information to have accurately come to the position that I do have? So that I do think is value in not just ignoring what somebody else is saying. So another value of constructive conversation is that underrepresented views can have the chance to emerge. Yeah, think about, we keep talking about the moderates in between that maybe are not having an opportunity to speak, that by having constructive conversations, maybe folks who are not having their voice heard get a chance to be heard. And disagreements that are persistently discussed are those where neither person has yet been or is likely to be persuaded. So again, this is sort of speaking to the folks that are moderate. If people are having conversations more frequently, then the person who maybe doesn't have a position yet is having that opportunity to actually evaluate all the different pieces of evidence and coming to their position without necessarily being influenced by all those things that we were talking about before, where it was really more about confirmation bias that was impacting decisions. So instead, they're actually getting an opportunity to look at all the evidence, hopefully. Whoops. So, and then I think what's kind of cool is that if you have that constructive conversation, then you get to ask, well, what did I get out of that? Like I was saying in that previous slide, to me, there's that thing of data collection. Now I get to find out stuff. So, what was your objective, for your particular viewpoint? Are you trying to improve animal welfare? Are you trying to refine a procedure? Are you trying to understand a scientific principle? Are you trying to accurately disseminate information? Are you trying to get a better understanding on the positions? So maybe you find out, was there some misrepresentation that, you need to address? Was there new information to evaluate? Was there new evidence that you didn't know about that now you need to further investigate? Maybe you'll field test information that you learned. I would say that for me, a really important conversation that happened at a conference that has literally changed my animal training, completely changed it. And I just think at that time, it was polarizing for me. Was this whole idea about negative reinforcement. I've probably told the story many times, and some of you have already heard it, but it was at the Art and Science of Animal Training conference, and I can still picture myself drinking a glass of wine at the Icebreaker with Jesus Rosales Ruiz, and he was telling me that animal trainers don't really understand counter conditioning and systematic desensitization, that the way we are describing it and what we're doing don't really match up. And I remember being open to hearing what he had to say and listening to it. And I thought I had an understanding of it, but I realized as we were talking that I didn't. And that put me in the position to be open to this idea of when animals want distance as a reinforcer and shaping with negative reinforcement. And I just had that seed planted in my brain, and I thought about it, and I was like, okay, let me think about this. And then when an opportunity came, when I was at a zoo in Poland, and there were these wild asses that were afraid of people, and people were trying to do all these crazy things to get them used to people that were more reliant on the things that Jesus was telling me that animal trainers didn't quite understand. I tried the negative reinforcement stuff, and in one session I had gone from animals who were so afraid of me they were at the back of the pen to animals eating from my hand in one session. And so that was me field testing the information that I had learned. And it was a safe place for me to do it because, nobody was standing over my shoulders judging me or saying, oh, you're doing it wrong, or, how dare you use negative reinforcement. But it was an opportunity for me to try what I learned, and a safe place for me to try it. And that completely changed everything for me. And that was like, I think I calculated like 7 or 8 years ago now, and since then I've been over and over and over and over again seeing these situations where animals are trying to get away from an aversive stimulus, or trying to drive it away, or want that aversive condition to go away. And now I've been practicing it and practicing and practicing and practicing it. And what was also really cool at this conference where I just attended was a person who works with humans, who is also basically doing that same thing with humans who are afraid of things, whether it's like eardrops or a vacuum cleaner. And I don't want to share his stories for you because those are his to share, but it's so cool to see him applying that and having the same kind of success we are. And Chris says, this all makes sense. I'm thinking that cognitive dissonance can get in the way of listening to new training ideas and changing my mind. Something to be aware of in myself. Oh yeah, me too. I think we get sort of stuck in our ways. So yeah, but it's just so cool to have these moments, where if we let ourselves have those conversations. So for sure, these constructive conversations can impact your position. And then maybe you make a little pros and cons list on the topic, and so again, and not to say that we're all polarized, sometimes we are in that moderate place that brings us to a different position on our on our moderate place. And how does what you learned impact your objective, whether it is to improve animal welfare or refine your procedure or maybe understand a scientific principle. I mean, and these are just some examples of things that, might be your objectives there. So maybe I'll share, since I keep talking about negative reinforcement, I have another example since we still have time here. And this was, it's a little longer video, but it'd be fun to share. It's a pigeon, Victoria crown pigeon. And the situation with this bird is that its history is that when people would come into its enclosure, it would kind of come to the door and then have an inclination to show a little bit of territorial aggression. And so what this person is going to work on is teaching the bird what behavior we want the bird to do, which is, it ends up kind of being more like a stationing behavior over towards it'll be like the left side of your screen. And the way that we end up teaching that is by having the the person remove themselves. So they start to go into the enclosure, but then they remove themselves when the bird is in the right position. Hopefully I explained that right, but hopefully you'll see in the video.
Sometimes. I think that was a
Yeah.
Try it again.
So she started to walk towards it, but now now she's walking towards it. So you could come back out and be like, but she stopped. She went halfway. You're like, huh, interesting. And you could technically, oh, yeah, so who knows what that preen is? Is that a redirected or is that
an actual undesired.
right? It could be a little pissed off preen, who knows? Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm in there, she's just fake legit free.
Right.
But then every once in a while it is the short.
It's kind of like finale and his scratching, like it's not real scratching, right? He does all that sort of display scratching. Yeah.
He's on the move. He's on the move. Did he come in? I feel like that was slightly better though, because he was sitting there. Yeah. Side for a little longer.
See, I think some of that's like that. So she will come to the shelf for me because she's nosy and wants to see what I'm doing. Like, because I'll be like doing stuff. But I usually like say hi to her from the shelf, and then I come in, and then she'll kind of watch, and she's.
Well, we don't
Sometimes she'll
just.
stay on the shelf for me. She doesn't really care, and I can do stuff on the shelf. Sometimes she'll fly out.
Yeah, that's how she is for me too.
She doesn't like run after me.
But if you know it's a precursor for bad stuff for you.
Sometimes. I think that was a balance.
Yeah.
Try it again.
So she started to walk towards it, but now now she's walking towards it. So you could come back out and be like, but she stopped. She went halfway. You're like, huh, interesting. And you could technically, oh, yeah, so who knows what that preen is? Is that a redirected or is that
An actual undesired.
right? It could be a little pissed off preen, who knows? Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm in there, she's just fake legit free.
Right.
But then every once in a while it is the short.
It's kind of like finale and his scratching, like it's not real scratching, right? He does all that sort of display scratching. Yeah.
He's on the move. He's on the move. Did he come in? I feel like that was slightly better though, because he was sitting there. Yeah. Side for a little longer.
See, I think some of that's like that. So she will come to the shelf for me because she's nosy and wants to see what I'm doing. Like, because I'll be like doing stuff. But I usually like say hi to her from the shelf, and then I come in, and then she'll kind of watch, and she's.
Well, we don't
Sometimes she'll
just.
stay on the shelf for me. She doesn't really care, and I can do stuff on the shelf. Sometimes she'll fly out.
Yeah, that's how she is for me too.
She doesn't like run after me.
But if you know it's a precursor for bad stuff for you, maybe training her to stay over there is the right thing,
That might be a wise.
Yeah.
Definitely doesn't jump onto the ground.
Yeah.
Might be a you thing, Sabrina.
I think that anybody she doesn't really know.
Yeah. So we don't know if that's like I want to kick your butt or not, right? It could be. I don't know.
On the move slowly.
So I'm just noticing that the audio on that is like weird, but the video was correct. Like the audio repeated itself, but the video showed you the progression. A major problem with trying to have good discussions on polarized topic is the need for good critical thinking skills, which are often lacking. Yeah, and I guess, kind of even like, like you're seeing some shaping there with negative reinforcement. I think sometimes you have to you have to look for the small approximations that you can reinforce, and keep in mind, that going back to, I think, this video, how does it happen, that sometimes maybe, the person that you may be having the conversation with, they may also, their information may be the result of limited access to information. They may have some confirmation bias because of these different things here, right? So that can be a challenge. So it may be that you're only going to get so far with the person that you're having the conversation with. So that might be one of the challenges, depending on who you're talking to. And again, that might be if you're talking to someone who's on an extreme end, and it may be that talking with somebody who's in the moderate middle might be a good starting point too. I think sometimes that's one of the things that we find is, we start talking to people that we feel are a little bit receptive, and then we try to grow from there. But sometimes it's just like shaping behavior. If you start with the most extreme difficult thing, we don't make great progress. But if we start someplace where we see there's a little behavior that we can shape, we build from there, right? But starting at the extreme ends can sometimes be really difficult. But we're looking for those little tiny things that we can reinforce and build from there. But I think one of the things that, we kind of are finding is by not contributing to it is one of the things that can be helpful. I think we're finding that it's escalating in a lot of situations when people are intentionally taking those polarizing positions. So I think if we can try to be engaged and try and do a little bit more of those, give and take conversations and reinforcing things that are along that are reinforceable for us, that can help. I think one of the big ones is misrepresentations of positions. That's a for me is definitely a thing that I think is helpful to try and see if we can reveal. That can be a big challenge when we don't have those constructive conversations, if we're not addressing those misrepresentations. So we're actually getting close to the end here, so I might do a little recap here. Polarization has impacted many communities, including the world of animal training. It has played an important role in the development of procedures that have led to improved welfare. And I think we could probably acknowledge that. We have seen a movement towards reinforcement-based procedures and building behavioral repertoires, as opposed to focusing on punishing undesired responses, at least in some communities, and we know it's still out there some places. But we also see that polarization has fallout that divides communities and impacts relationships. So if we evaluate how we communicate and disseminate information about animal training, perhaps the same progress can be made without polarization. Constructive conversations may allow us to collect more data to fully support our position if we need it, or make reasonable changes at the same time maintain collaborative relationships with colleagues and friends. So like I said, I've got some references that those of you that are members of animaltrainingfundamentals.com might find helpful if you want to keep going down this path and reading a little bit more about this information, because I found it quite interesting as I was diving into it. And in the past, we have done some You Be the Behavior Consultants that are very complementary to this topic. We did one on addressing resistance to change quite recently, and also the one on disseminating practices of animal training information. And this one really talked about the use of inflammatory language and taking things out of context, and how that was the stuff about persuasion tactics that are really a bit deceptive. So that's really important to check out if you want to learn more about that. And what else is new on the horizon? Well, I just put this in Animal Training Fundamentals yesterday. So those of you that are into training giraffes, this is a PDF download that is just a kind of a nice little get started setting up your giraffe training program. And if you're not a member, this resource you can access it. You can CAN. ATFgiraffes.com is a way to get to that, and you can download this PDF. It's shareable. It has clickable links in it. And if you're a member, you can go in there right now and you can click all the links. It'll take you all to all these different resources that are within animaltrainingfundamentals.com that you can access right now. You do have to be a member to access some of the courses and stuff that are in the PDF, but it's still a useful resource even if you're not a member. So that is available to you. And if you didn't see the amazing GOATS presentation on training animals to voluntarily swallow pills, we're talking about not hiding pills in food. We're talking about truly swallowing a capsule whole and taking a little sip of something and then swallowing that pill. It was a really great GOATS presentation by Rachel Hughes from the Frank Buck Zoo. That replay is available now in animaltrainingfundamentals.com. If you're a member, you have access to it for free. If you are not a member, we do have some options for you as well. You can go to atfgoats.com and click on the recordings button for that if you are not a member. But hey, become a member and you can get all the cool stuff there. And then just a heads up, we have the IAZA Animal Training Workshop in Helsinki, Finland. That workshop, the registration is now open and there are limited spaces. So I do recommend you register for that as soon as you can. And we'll see you in person in Finland for all you folks that are coming to that conference. Oh, and Soraya says, swallowing training with my domestic cat is going great. And she said that it was a great presentation. Oh, I'm excited to hear how that training is going, Soraya. That's so cool that that presentation was able to help you. And here is the citation for this particular You Be the Behavior Consultant if you find the information useful and want to reference it. And if you are not yet a member of animaltrainingfundamentals.com, please come join us. We have several options for you. You can become a monthly member. You get a savings if you do the annual one. And we do have a facility option where you can have up to 200 individual sub-accounts for all your staff members. And you can enjoy that as well. So there you go. That is our live stream for this week. And we have a thank you. That was great. We'll be tuning in for future talks. Well, awesome. We enjoy having you here. And let's see, coming in late, but really, Anne is here, really interested in more investigation into choice and control. Me too. And I am so excited to have Anna here and sharing her comments as well. I can't wait to talk to you more about that. All right, you guys. Well, here we are. We're at the top of the hour. Yes, more. More on choice and control. Can't wait to talk about that topic and many others with you guys. Well, you guys, we are at the top of the hour and I don't want to keep you over that. So it's Monday and I'm sure you all are busy and doing fun things, and I will look forward to catching up with you next time. And there we go. So it's great having you here. Missed seeing you all last week, but it's always nice to see you here live and in person. All right, you guys, have a great week and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye.